Hello and welcome. We are going to do a spreadsheet simulation of random sampling of a population. We're going to look at the situation of, let's say, examining the sample proportion of left-handed people in a population. So what is random sampling? Well, if we are examining something about a large population, we might struggle to count every single person in that population, but we could take a smaller sample of a size that we can count, and then we might examine that sample and identify we've got maybe 1 out of 6 people in our sample here that are of the thing we're interested in. Okay, we can form what's called a sample proportion, where X is the number of people that show a certain characteristic, and N is the sample size, how many people we've sampled from the population. And so we call the sample proportion, we're going to denote that as a P hat. That's what we call our sample statistic, the proportion of the people that we're examining with a certain characteristic out of our sample. Whereas the true population parameter is we will denote as P, which is our population proportion. Okay, so it's the true amount of people displaying the characteristic out of the total population. We're going to be looking at the lefties today, and we're going to examine it in a simulation using a spreadsheet. Let's get to it. So first off, set up a Google Sheets sheet like this. You can give it a title, and when you're ready, what we're going to do is hit this arrow to give us a little bit more room on the screen. Alright, here we go. So first off, let's put a title of population. We're going to set up our population first, and we're going to use these first 2 columns. So first one is going to be our population number, how many people we want in our population. We're going to have many, so we're going to have to add some more cells in our sheet. And we're going to put in our population characteristic. In this case, we're going to be looking at people that have either a left hand or a right hand. Okay, who are left-handed or right-handed. Now, in regards to that, we also need to have a p-value, our population proportion. Alright, now this cell here is where we're going to set up our population proportion. I'm going to put a bold there. So let's say for now, it's shared 50-50. So 50% are right-handed, 50% might be left-handed for now. Now, let's get this population going. Now, I need to add a lot more cells. So what I'm going to do is go down to the very last cell available on this Google Sheet. So I'm going to hold down the Control button on my keyboard. I'm going to press the down arrow. And it drops you all the way down to the very bottom. Okay, so if you have a look what we have here, we've got this where it says add more rows. I'm going to add another 1,000. So now I've got 2,000 rows. Alright, that will be in handy. Okay, so let's now go back to the top. I'm going to press Control and press the up arrow on my keyboard. Look at that, straight to the top. Alright, let's put our numbers in. We're going to start with person number 1, then person number 2, then person number 3, then person number 4. That's going to take forever. So, the little trick is, I'm going to highlight the lot, and I'm going to click and drag, and as you do that, you can see it fills out the count. Okay, so what we are going to do is do the same copy and bring it all the way down to the row 2000. Let's go. So click and drag on the cell, drag it all the way down. Keep it going, keep it going. Sometime later, I'm still going. Almost there though. 6, 17, 18, keep going, almost there. 19,000, 2,000. Okay, there we go. We're going to have 2,000 cells in our row. Now, we don't have 2,000 in the population because I started at row 2. So maybe can I get an even number? Let's add 2 more cells. Add. Okay, there we go. 1 and 2,000. Okay, now we've got a population of 2,000. Let's get up to the top again. Press Control and up. Okay, so I've numbered each member in my population. Now let's give them a characteristic. So I'm going to write an if statement to say if a random number, this is my rand function, which generates a random number between 0 to 1. If my random number is less than my population proportion, so 50% of the population, I want to have a, let's say, a left hand, while the other, if it was not true and it was greater than 0.5, my random number, then I'm going to have right-handed person. So this is my first cell. So as you can see, it's might have generated a left-handed person on mine or a right-handed person on yours, depending on what the result was of our rand function here. So let's copy this one down all the way to the bottom. But fortunately, there's a little trick to do this really quickly. See this little square here? This time, I'm not going to click and drag that one down. I'm going to double click on this square. Watch this. Double click. Oh, and have a look at that. It's copied it all the way down. But all the way down to row 2,000, the population. But we've got a little problem. Have a look what's happened. Everybody is right-handed. We can't have that. What kind of society do we want to live in where everyone's right-handed? Terrible. Okay, so what was the problem? If we look at the formula, when we've copied it down, we've started at cell C1 and then we've copied it down one cell and went to C2 and then C3 and C4. So it's referring to this cell here and there's nothing there. So what's the solution? We've got to remember to use $sign to fix it to the cell. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to delete what I've just done. I'm going to select my row 4, press Control, Shift and down, select all that, delete it, go back to the top, Control up. There we go, back to the top. Alright, let's fix that cell formula. This time I'm going to lock it in on row 1. Every time I copy it down, I don't want to copy anything lower, so just row 1, that one right there. Now let's do it. Double click on the square. There we go, there's our population of left-handed and right-handed people. Perfect. Alright, now what we're going to do is take some random sampling of the population. So let's produce some samples. How big do we want our samples? Well, for now, let's try a sample of maybe 30 people from the population. That's reasonable. Now, I'm not going to be using or changing this number for now, but if some clever adjusts to some interesting formula, we could be able to manually change the size of our sample later on. But for now, keep it as is. Now, I'm going to set up a space here to work out my sample proportion. Alright, that's going to be this cell right underneath it. So I'm going to get the sample proportion. Alright, and here comes the sample. I need about a size of 30 rows. So 30 rows, so it's about there. I think that's 30 rows. Okay. Well, one less, I think. Yep. 35 up to there. Okay. Get 30 rows, put a box around them to highlight it. Okay. So now let's from in each cell we're going to take a sample, a random sample from a person in the population. So I'm going to do a special rule called a Vlookup Formula. Now this looks up a member in the population according to what number we have. So I'm going to randomly choose a number in the population from 1 to 2000, and then the Vlookup formula is going to look up what is the characteristic for that person. So for example, I might randomly choose person 20, and then the Vlookup formula will look up the characteristic for person 20, that being a left-handed person. Okay, so let's first look up a random person. So let's type in the rand between function. Rand between function. Okay, so I'm going to randomly select a number between 1 to 2000. Okay, they're the members of the population. Okay, now the next part of the rule is to have a look at the instructions. Here it is in the Vlookup formula. First is the search key, that's some number between 1 to 2000, a member of the population. And the next part is the range. Now the range is the range of data that I'm going to be looking up essentially, and that being the two columns of our population. So in this space after the comma, I'm going to have that cell and that cell. Now I'm going to hold Control, Shift and press down. Hold down Control, Shift and down, and I'm going to highlight the whole population there. There we have it. Okay, now I'm going to be copying this cell acrossways for different samples, so I'm just going to lock that in with $signs. Excellent. Okay, now what we have to do now is give the index. Now the index is referring to the index is defined here, the column index of the value. So the column index in this case is, I'm going all over the place. Mistakes. Okay. So the column index is in our range. I've got two columns, column 1 and column 2. Okay. So I want to refer to the characteristic of the population which is in column 2 to return whether they're left or right-handed. Okay, and then the last part of the syntax is say whether we have the information sorted or not. So sorted meaning that the first row, the lookup, the search key is sorted, and in this case it is because it's sorted from 1 to 2000. So I'm going to type true to say yes, it is sorted. Okay, and there it is. Let's hit enter and see what we get. Okay, so I've randomly selected a person and they're right-handed. Now let's copy that down because I want to do that same random sampling for a size of 30. Copy that, click and drag the box down to the cell to get 30 people. Okay, now I can check to see that I've got 30 in my sample by coming down here. You may not see it on this screen, but down here there's a little thing that says count, and I've counted 30 that I've highlighted there. So I'm ready to go. Excellent, so there we have it. We've got our first sample of 30 people. Let's work out that proportion of left-handed people in the sample. This is called our sample proportion. Okay, so I'm going to use a count if statement to count the range for left-handed people. So I'm going to select a range and then my criterion. In this case, my criterion is L for left-handed people. So my range, get rid of the information, I can close it. So I'm going to, in this spot after the bracket, count from this cell down to the bottom of my sample. There it is, comma, and I'm going to count left-handed people, so I'm going to put it L in talking marks like so. So that's going to be the result of my count. I've got 15 left-handed people in my sample, and I want to divide by the number of people in the sample altogether. This is my sample proportion. Okay, given by, and we can look at the notes we did before. Oops, sorry. There it is. There's our sample proportion for p hat, the x, the number of people, out of the total sample size. That's what we're after. So I've got 30 people in my sample. Okay, divide by 30. Okay, so it just randomized itself again, and there's my first sample proportion, and with my sample of 30 people. So that's called random sampling. Now we're going to simulate many samples. Random sampling process. So we're about to copy this all the way across. So I'm going to come over and think about how many different random samples I want. I'm thinking lots and lots. Now I've only got rows up to Z, columns up to Z. That's not enough columns. I'm thinking I need to make more columns. So what I'm going to do is insert some columns. If I go insert one to the left, I put in a column, and now I've got one more column. So how many columns do I need? Well, I'm thinking quite a few, so I'm going to do this in chunks. I'm going to first click on the column bar, highlight the whole column, hold down the shift key on the keyboard, press the cross arrow, and I'll highlight a whole lot there. Now if I right click in this space, I can insert columns. I'm going to insert 23 more to the right. Okay, there's another set of 23 columns. So I'm going to do that again. Come back over here, grab that, hold down the shift key, select all those columns, I'm going to right click, I'm going to insert even more to the right. Okay, get the idea? So let's do that a few times. Let's see if we get maybe a few hundred columns in there, or as many as Google Sheets is going to allow us for now, because we want to repeat our random sampling many times. Well, I've kept doing that process for a number of times, and now look how many columns I've got way over here. Now if I put any more, if I select some of that, select some of them and right click and insert some more to the right, I can fit a few more in. But if I try to do the whole lot, press Control. Now if I want to select the whole lot from this point on, I'm going to press Control Shift and my right arrow click on the keyboard, like so. Now watch this. If I try and insert many more, another 700 columns, whoop, doesn't like it. Too many. I've got maximum cell count achieved on my workbook. Google's not happy, so we can't put as many. That's a shame. So what we're going to have to do is just come back over here, maybe not so many to select, and see if we can put a few more in. Okay, so I've got a good 700 there. That's okay. Now let's go ahead and reproduce, copy this sample, what we have, right across. Now just to check, I've got all my dollar signs in the right place, because I don't want to change that reference, because I want to still reference my population. Okay, that's good. Let's do it. I'm going to start from sample proportion, highlight this whole lot. Here we go. Come back. Alright, press Control C to copy. Now to get this highlighted region all the way across, I'm going to hold down the Control key, hold down the Shift key, and press my right arrow on my keyboard, and there we have it all the way across to the very last column. I'm going to press my second click on my mouse pad. There we have it, and I'm going to paste my, not values only, I'm going to hit the paste to paste the formula and everything. Okay, now this is a big job for the poor Google Sheet. There's a lot of things to calculate. Oh, there we have it. Look at that. It's all my random samples. Many repeated times. Fantastic. Okay, to get back to the start, I'm going to hold down Control and press my left key. Alright, now I've got all my sample proportions there. I might think, well, how many do I have really? I've got, let's count how many samples. About 750. I want a little bit more than 1,000. So how am I going to get more? Well, let's come down, grab our size of our sample. Now I'm going to highlight the whole lot, Control Shift right. Beautiful. I'm going to press Control C to copy it. Now just make sure it's copied. It's going to make Google work hard. Now I've copied the whole lot. I want to reproduce that. So if I come down to this space, it's still highlighted, so it's still in copied. I'm going to just press right click on that spot and paste, and go ahead and copy the whole lot again. So I've kind of doubled how many random samples that I've done. I've now done over 1,000, 1,500 approximately. That's a lot. Okay, lots of random samples. So I've got all of them, and I've got all these ones as well. There's lots and lots there. Okay, so let's start to make sense of what we're doing. We've done a process of a random sample from a population, and I've reproduced the process of random sampling many times. So every time I've done a random sample from a population, the sample proportion of the number of lefties out of a sample of 30, that sample proportion keeps changing. Here it is 0.63, 0.43, 0.5, 0.46, and so on. They're all quite different in their number. So what I'm going to do now is examine the shape of how the numbers, the amount of all these numbers change. It's called the distribution. So what is going to be the data I want to see in a graph, in a histogram of my distribution? I have the range from C5 all the way down to A, C, D, 5 as well. There's a lot there. So if I've selected all my sample proportions, I'm going to insert a chart. Come down, and I'm going to click on this button here, my chart. Now that's certainly not the way I want it. So if I come over to chart type, let's grab a histogram chart way down here in the other section. There's my histogram chart. Click on histogram. Okay, now my data's all mumbled, so let's have a look at the data carefully. I want to not have so many different things, so come down the bottom. Let's have a look what we got. What can we do? I'm going to switch rows and columns. Aha, look at that. So down the horizontal axes, I've got all the possible values for my sample proportion from 0.2 as high as 0.8. Okay, and this is the count of how many amounts we have for that particular sample proportion. And you can see it's got this, it's kind of like a bell-shaped curve. Isn't that interesting? Yes, it is. Well, I thought more than 750 random samples might be useful, so let's add some more data to that. I'm going to add another range. Now this range is going to now be, come down here, have a look. I'm going to incorporate all these sample proportions as well. So it's from this amount to the end. So Control Shift right click all them as well. Okay, I'm going to add this extra data to my count. Hit OK. Alright, let's go back to our graph. Where is our graph? Oh, there he is. How am I going to get my graph all the way back to the other side? It's got much better histogram now, but I'm over in the A, B, Z column. No good. Can I move to an own sheet? That'll do it. Perfect. Look at that. Well, let's present our graph. It's important to, I can click on my graph, here I get some chart editor. It's important to put information like the title and give labels to the axes. So in my chart axes and labels, let's put a title. So an appropriate title for this is the distribution of say sample proportions, okay, of lefties in the population. Okay, perfect, there we have it. And let's get some, what else? A horizontal axis title. Okay, so horizontally along here, we all have our different sample proportions. Okay, and the vertical axis, this is our frequency count of each type of sample proportion. Much better. Let's have a look at it. Ha, look at that. Very good. Okay, so let's come back to our data again. Some interesting things we might want to know as well about the distribution of the sample proportions is perhaps something about the most common, the most likely, or the average sample proportion out of all the different sample proportions we've collected here. So what we're going to do is find out the average, okay, and we're going to do that using the average function, okay, just like so. So I'm going to select my range that I want to take the average of, select the first cell and then hold down Control Shift and across to select the whole lot. There we have it. And that's the average of the first one. And if I press comma, then I should be able to now do the same with the next lot as well. Control Shift and press left this time to select all the rest. There we go. Selected my two ranges that I want to take the average of. Hit enter. And there's my overall. It's going to calculate the overall average that I have of all my sample proportions. And it's the expected value of my expected sample proportion. There it is. And if I look at what I get, it's kind of close to, have a look, it's kind of close to the population proportion. Isn't that interesting? That time it is, look at that. Okay, so that's an important statistic to consider. What is the average or the mean of the distribution of the sample proportions, and we'll find out that's very similar or the same as the population proportion. Okay, other things we can do is work out something about the spread, how much distribution, how much spread in the distribution there is in our curve, in our normal bell-shaped type curve distribution of our sample proportions. So the spread we're going to crudely estimate by just thinking about the most maximum to the most minimum. Okay, and that is fine for our purposes today. So let's find the maximum and the minimum in our sample proportions. So I'm going to use what I have here, that range. I'm going to keep that range as a shortcut. So using that, I'm just going to press Control C to copy. Now it's in my clipboard. I'm going to come over to this range here. I'm going to hit the equal sign to say I'm about to type a formula. I want my max. I want to get the maximum value. So now I'm going to copy that range, paste that range back in that I copied. So Control V, there it is. And I can get my maximum value. Let's do the same for a minimum value. So type in the min function, and again Control V to copy in my range that I had copied, paste in my range. Alright, so if I've got my maximum value and minimum value, I can work out what is my overall range of numbers of my sample proportions. So it's simply the maximum value minus the minimum value. That's the range. Okay, so there's some basic statistics about the distribution of our sample proportion of left-handed people, and we have concluded our simulation. Thank you very much, and enjoy making your own.